The shadow on the wall is not yours anymore. You have been watching it for 40 nights. You know the way it sits. You know the angle of its shoulders, the particular stillness of it when the lamp behind you holds steady. You know your own shape the way you know your own voice. But the shape on the wall just moved. And you did not. It did not flicker. It did not drift the way a shadow drifts when a flame wavers. It turned. Slowly. Deliberately. The line of the shoulder rotated a few degrees in the opposite direction from your body. And then something happened at the top of the shape, a slight tremor, just below where the head meets the neck, like a dog shaking water from its ears. You are not moving. The lamp is not moving. The shadow is. You should stop. Everything inside you that is still reasonable is screaming that you should stand up right now, walk out of this room, drive home, and never come back to this place again. But you have been here 40 nights. And tomorrow is the last one. His name was Caleb Pruitt, and he was 23 years old, and he lived in a one-bedroom apartment off Route 40 outside Harlan, Kentucky, in the kind of building where the parking lot lights had been out for so long that nobody remembered them ever working. He worked the morning shift at a lumber yard on the edge of town, loading and unloading flatbeds 6 days a week. He was not unhappy with this. He liked the physicality of it, the way his body knew what to do without his mind needing to be involved, which left his mind free to go wherever it wanted. And his mind, since he was a boy, had always wanted to go to the same place. The place where ordinary rules stopped applying. He had grown up hearing things, a great-uncle who claimed to have seen something in the tree line behind the family property in the winter of 1987, a neighbor woman who kept her lights on every night of her life and refused to explain why, stories passed around the volunteer fire department where his father served that were always told quietly and always at the end of a long night when people were tired enough to be honest. Caleb had listened to all of it. He had never dismissed any of it. He had cataloged it the way other people cataloged sports statistics or guitar chords, methodically, obsessively, without entirely understanding why. By 23 he had read everything he could find. By 23 he had found something he could not stop thinking about. There was a practice. An old one. 41 consecutive nights in a specific kind of isolation. A lamp. A wall. A shadow. Words repeated until something in the world answered them. In his apartment he kept a small ceramic dish on the windowsill that had belonged to his grandmother, a pale blue thing she had used for rings and earrings. He was not sure why he kept it. He just liked it there. He liked the color of it in the morning light. He did not know yet that this detail would return to him at the worst possible moment. He chose an abandoned agricultural building 12 miles outside Harlan, at the end of a county road that the GPS did not acknowledge. A former processing facility of some kind, the equipment stripped out years ago, the floor concrete, the smell of old grain still present in the walls on cold nights. No one had any reason to be there. He confirmed this on the first 3 visits, arriving at different hours, sitting in his truck and watching. Nothing came. Nothing went. He went in on the first night with a battery-powered camp lantern, a folding chair, and the kind of deliberate calm that takes a long time to manufacture. He faced the wall. He positioned the lamp behind him so that his shadow fell forward onto the concrete face in front of him. He fixed his eyes on the center of the shadow's chest and he began to speak the specific sequence of words he had spent 4 months locating. The first 10 days felt like nothing. He drove out there, he sat, he spoke, he drove home. His shadow was his shadow. The building was an empty building. The only sounds were his own voice and occasionally something small moving in the rafters above him. He noticed he was sleeping less. He noticed he was speaking less at work. He noticed that when he was at the lumber yard, part of his attention was always back in that building, in that chair, facing that wall. The hours between ending his shift and driving out there at night had begun to feel like an interruption. On the 14th night the lamp flickered once, though there was no draft. He told himself it was the battery. On the 19th night the shadow on the wall shifted its weight from one side to the other. Not dramatically. Not obviously. Just a subtle redistribution, the way a person shifts when they have been sitting in one position too long. He told himself it was an optical effect. The wall was uneven. His eyes were tired. Human vision, when fixed on a single point for a long period of time, generates its own interference. He knew this was not an optical effect. He kept going. By the 22nd night there was no more rationalizing. He had stopped trying. He watched his shadow breathe. That is the only way to describe it. A regular, rhythmic expansion and contraction of the chest of the shape on the wall, slightly out of phase with his own breathing, as if something were using his form as a template while not quite managing to synchronize with the original. When he exhaled, the shadow's chest held steady. When he inhaled, the shadow let out. He kept his eyes fixed. He kept his voice steady. On the way home that night he stopped at the gas station on Route 40 and sat in the parking lot for 40 minutes before going inside to pay for his gas because he was not sure his legs would hold him. The nights that followed had a specific quality that he could not have predicted and could not describe to anyone, a quality of something attending. Of something that had noticed him noticing it, and had decided to remain. The shadow moved less dramatically after the initial display. It simply felt inhabited. The way a room feels when someone is standing in it silently, even before you see them. He told no one. He was on day 38 before he finally permitted himself to believe he might actually succeed. That was the first of his 2 mistakes. The 40th night arrived and then passed. He drove home before dawn with his hands gripping the wheel and something in his chest that he could not identify, not quite pride, not quite dread, not quite both. Tomorrow was the last night. You are inside the building now. Night 41. The lamp is lit. The chair is placed. You have been in this position hundreds of times and this time feels entirely different. The air in here is different. The quality of the silence is different, and when you look at the wall in front of you your shadow is already moving before you have said a single word. It is rising. Not growing taller the way a shadow grows when the light source drops, it is separating. The edges of it are lifting away from the concrete surface the way a sheet of paper lifts away from a table in a draft, the center holding while the edges curl and peel. Then the center holding less. Then the whole thing shifting, reforming, thickening into something that occupies space in front of the wall rather than on it. It has a height. It has a dimension. You continue speaking. Your voice does not shake. This is the most frightening thing you will learn about yourself tonight, that when the moment you have been working toward for 41 nights finally arrives, your body simply proceeds. Your mouth keeps moving. Your eyes stay open. The shape reaches a height that is not possible for the room's geometry to have produced from your lamp and your body. Something resolves at the top of it that might be a head. On either side of the head, 2 protrusions. Asymmetrical. Curved. The atmosphere in the building changes. There is a weight to the air that was not there before, a pressure that is not temperature and is not sound but is something your body registers as physical, the way your body registers standing too close to a highway when a semi passes at speed. You complete the final words. The shape moves toward you. It speaks. You have found me, it says. What you want is yours to ask. The voice is not human. It does not pretend to be human. It simply exists, filling the room from all sides simultaneously, carrying no emotion that you can recognize, not warmth, not malice, just presence, vast and immediate and entirely aware of you. You feel something you were not prepared to feel, joy. And then you make your second mistake. You speak to it. Casually. Confidently. As if it is something you have captured. As if you are in a position to issue demands. What came out of you in that moment, what you said, the tone in which you said it, is not something you will be able to fully account for afterward. It was the voice of someone drunk on having been right. Of someone who has spent 41 nights in the dark and emerged into what felt like light. The thing screamed. The sound hit you from every direction simultaneously, and then it was gone, the shape, the weight in the air, the inhabited quality of the room, all of it gone in a fraction of a second, leaving behind a silence so complete it had a texture. You drove home. You were not concerned yet. You were still explaining it to yourself, still constructing a version of events in which you had technically succeeded, and what happened at the end was a minor mismanagement, a correctable error. Your apartment was quiet when you arrived. You lay down. You heard, from somewhere in the room, a sound like footsteps that were not footsteps, something heavier, something that did not move the way a body moves, dragging slightly on every other beat. Then every cabinet in your kitchen opened and closed at once. Then the ceramic dish on your windowsill, your grandmother's dish, the pale blue one, the one that had no reason to be significant, flew from the ledge and struck the far wall and shattered, and in the ringing silence after it hit you heard a voice that was the same voice from the building, now confined, now close, now intimately near your ear. You made an error, it said. I am not obligated to leave. The 18 nights passed the way the first 41 had passed, slowly, and then all at once. On the final night inside the boundary the older man had drawn, Caleb completed his words and watched the wall and felt what had been haunting his apartment for 2 weeks reform in front of him, the dark shape, the height, the pressure, the voice. And then something else arrived. Something that did not come from the wall. Something that came from the air itself, from a direction that did not correspond to any cardinal point in the room. It had a light to it that was not a color he could name, not white, not yellow, something that sat at the edge of his perception and did not resolve into a form so much as a presence, enormous and calm. The two things occupied the same space. What happened between them in the next several minutes, Caleb could not later describe with any precision. He heard a sound he felt more than heard. He felt the ground shift once, briefly, as if something very far below it had moved. He felt the pressure in the air discharge like a storm breaking. Then the room was empty. The older man spoke from outside the perimeter. "It is finished," he said. "Come out." Caleb stepped out of the boundary and stood in the room and felt something he had not felt in 23 nights, nothing. The air was simply air. The room was simply a room. When he looked at the wall, his shadow was his shadow, fixed, proportional, doing exactly what his shadow had always done. He went home. On his windowsill was the ceramic dish he had kept there since he was 19. His grandmother's dish. Pale blue. Intact. He had no memory of replacing it. He did not know if it had been replaced or if it had never been broken, if some part of what he had lived through was in a timeline that had been folded back into itself and smoothed out. He left it where it was. He did not touch it. He did not think about what it might mean. There is a specific kind of person who believes that knowledge and control are the same thing. That if you can understand something, really understand it, name it, locate it, establish contact with it, then you can manage it. That information is equivalent to authority. Most of us encounter the limit of this belief in ordinary ways. A relationship that does not respond to analysis. A body that does not respond to discipline. A grief that does not respond to time. Some people encounter the limit in stranger places. What Caleb was reaching for, what he spent 41 nights building toward in an empty building outside Harlan, was not really power over something else. It was certainty. Proof. The confirmation that the world contained more than what ordinary life allowed him to see, and that he specifically was someone capable of seeing it. He got his confirmation. It cost him more than he had budgeted. The thing that stays with me about his account is not the shape on the wall or the voice in the dark apartment. It is the moment he describes when the thing first spoke to him and he felt, underneath everything else, joy. Pure and sudden and genuine joy. Because he had been right. Because the world was exactly as strange as he had always believed. Some doors are only recognizable as doors from the other side. And the house you enter is not always one you were meant to be in. There is something in the dark right now that is not afraid of you finding it. It is simply patient.